Welcome to the One Player Podcast, the show on solitaire board games. I'm your host, Albert, but this is episode 363.
Do you know the most common form of robot crime, Albert?
No, I do not. Crimes against humanity?
Battery.
Battery. Oh. Oh, battery, as in... as in beating people up kind of crime.
Yeah,
but also as in robots use bad. I'm sorry, I needed that one explained to me because that, yeah.
I've heard that if you explain a joke, Albert, it's quite dead.
Sometimes the jokes are funnier if they're jokes that require explaining, I think. Like, that's actually really clever. I like that a lot. I didn't get the humor because I'm dense, but I think it's clever.
I don't know if this was one of them. But we are going to be talking today.
Honestly, very little of our humor is actually funny.
That's true. We are going to be talking today about a board game, Bot Factory, where you are building robots. Hopefully to take over the world, but no, you don't get to take over the world at all. You're selling the bots.
Somebody else will take over the world. With your robots.
They're toy robots, so
I'm sure. Oh, are they toy robots? Okay.
They are toy robots. You're building, if you're familiar, my mother owns a Luna, and there's so many of these little toy friendship robots where it like runs around your house and says hello or things like that, or giant Baymax type characters. So you are building these, friend robots, and you are building each one custom. They're huge, and you are building them and selling them to people using, if you've heard of Kanban, it is sort of Kanban light, where you have a factory and you are performing different tasks in that factory to build your robots and take the parts and make the plans and sell them and capitalize on the stocks and get a lot of points by the time that all the rounds are done.
Okay. Cool. So it's Kanban Light. We talked about Kanban before, right? By Vital Lacerda. So it's the same designer. But it doesn't look like it. It just sort of feels like it in the game mechanics, I guess.
Sort of.
Okay. There's another game by him called Lisboa, and I never played that one, but there's a game called like Markets of Lisboa or something like that. That was, again, it took one of the core mechanics of that game and made it a simpler, smaller, more accessible game, because I understand Lisboa is pretty complicated. And I guess this is similar.
I've actually played Lisboa, and I've not played Mercado de Lisboa, but
okay.
I've heard the same sort of comments that this is supposed to be a more simply designed or a more approachable version of Kanban. I've only had the one play of Kanban myself, so I'm not going to attest to it, but it certainly has enough of a similar feel that it does. I think it does what it's being reported to do.
Okay, it at least feels familiar if you've played Kanban.
Yes.
Okay, and Kanban did have a lot to it. I remember there's like 6 different mini games in it, basically, and they're all separate, but they also interrelated. And yeah, it was a little bit hard to be good at.
This one doesn't feel like that. This one doesn't feel like each one is a mini game. This one feels like each one is just an action type. Much simpler.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's hear more about it, because I liked Kanban, but I ended up getting rid of it because there's just so much game, so big and complex, and so I'm not really going to get to play much. So let me move on.
Then I think that you probably would like this, but let's talk about it a bit more, and we'll especially get into the gameplay, which, unfortunately, we have these kind of discussions, is the last thing that we're going to say.
Oh.
But we'll get back to the gameplay. First, let's talk about some of these components.
Okay, let's do that.
So, Albert, I'm going to first talk about the board, because the board is kind of one of the more interesting components. The board is actually 4 separate boards. There's an assembly board, a part board, a project board, and a finance board. And each of those boards, it's kind of like an A4 size sheet or a letter size sheet of paper, but it's cardstock, or cardboard rather, full on chipboard, big, thick, chunky board type thing.
But not mounted.
Not mounted. I don't know what you mean by mounted.
Like mounted where the back and the front, like the back is got cardboard on it. I guess it is mounted, but they wraps. I don't mean anything by mounted. I'm talking nonsense. Go on.
No, it's full on, feels like a board, does not feel like paper.
Okay. Yep.
So, but they're 4 separate boards, and you'll just lay them one after the other. And theoretically, if you're feeling interesting, you can change the orientation on your board, on your table if you want. It might confuse yourself, but you could. But they're four separate boards. Each of the boards will have its own type of thing that's going on. So at assembly, you are putting together the parts. At parts, you are collecting the parts. At project, you are collecting the blueprints that you will then assemble corresponding to the blueprints. And in finance, you are going to be bidding on orders and bidding on stocks, and will be able to make some extra points for both of those respective things at the end of the game. Running along the bottom of those boards is going to be the spaces where your different characters are going to be going. So each of you essentially has a meeple. And along the bottom of the board, you'll be assigning your meeple at the beginning of each round to which of those different actions it is that you want to do. Speaking of meeples, everyone has a meeple. It is a simple meeple. It's got a little hard hat on for safety.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, and everyone has one of those. In addition, everyone has a set of speech tokens, and speech tokens will essentially be a currency that you're using to spend to get more powerful actions or obtain by using well timed use of actions. And those are all of the player stuff that is there for all the players. In terms of other components that the game has, so there's four different types of robots. There's blue, yellow, green, and red. Each of them have four meeples, and they're four distinct meeples. So special meeple shapes for one of them. They're all colored. They're all, they all have an actual design to them, and they all look really nice. Nice little meeples for each of the different robots. Each of the robots has three parts to it. There's a head, a middle, and a legs, or a head, a body, and a legs. Those first start as tiles, which are going to be shuffled up among the placement area, and then you'll go ahead and place them in the assembly portion. So you'll place this down as the assembly portion. If you have a full set of three, then you'll be able to build a robot. There's some universal ones that you'll be able to grab, and then there's some blueprint tiles, some project tiles. Those will show you what it is that is on order, because again, each of these is, according to the lore of the game, being custom ordered. I assume they're, very expensive, full size robot friends. So it's not cheap. So you have the blueprint tiles, and there's going to be a pile of them, and then you'll randomly display some of that will be available for people to claim on the project on the blueprint boards. There are also these four translucent plastic tiles, translucent plastic pegs or cylinders that you'll place on the finance board, that you'll be able to show what the sale price for each one of them is, because you are boxing them up and shipping them up, but the sale price is not determined until the end of the game. So maybe you'll want to try and refocus on all of those things.
Ah, that's interesting. And so this board, I like the way it looks a lot. It looks really busy when you first look at it. It's a little overwhelming, but it is a. It looks like a cartoony sort of art, and you start looking. Oh, it's a factory, and there's a walk path that connects all four. You could go from one board to the next, and sort of thing. And it's fun to look at, and it looks very functional.
There is a lot of art on the board. There's people around, there's people playing with the robots, and there's cranes, and there's displays. A lot of that very much fades into the background. The big aspects of things will essentially be the tiles that are being placed on it. So it's the fact that
Mm-hmm.
there's a dimensionality to it being performed. So all the big spaces, those are all big and bright and vibrant. You'll see where it is that things go, and all of the details will, you can play Where's Waldo and focus into the details, but they don't
Yeah,
detract and make the board too busy to be able to really focus on,
right. But
with one
I
exception.
think they add a lot to it. I think it's so much fun looking. Like each board is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and the on each board it's printed somewhere that looks like it's part of the scenery. Like on the first
Sure.
board, there's a loading dock, and the one is next to the doors to the warehouse. On the second board, it's printed on the ground. The third board, it's on a opening door. And
Yes.
fourth is up written on. It's just really neat. It's fun. I like
Yes.
that about it. Kanban was I'm gonna want to compare this to Kanban left and right. Feel free to stop me, but Kanban felt very sterile compared to this, and I liked it too. It was really cool, but this just looks more fun, more
Yeah.
accessible.
a lot of the business of the board sort of fades away. When we get back to Sandra and what it is that she does,
She's back. Oh.
Sandra is back. Sandra is still shouty. So when we talk about
Oh.
what Sandra does, Sandra has a different aspect of what she does on each of the boards, which is printed on the boards. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to notice that or understand the iconization of that.
Mm-hmm.
So because the boards are busy and fun, sometimes those sort of iconized messages will be lost.
Oh, okay. See, in Kanban, her name is Sandra, not Sandra, because she's German and they're making cars. That's that's the way I kept looking at it. I don't know. I mean, Kanban, of course, is not a German thing; it's more of a Japanese thing. But whatever. It's it's interesting that she's back. And for solo, no, was she in solo only? No, she was in the
No,
regular
she's a
game.
multiplayer.
Okay, she's also multiplayer here. Otherwise, a lot of stuff is familiar.
Valilla is the person who is coming by when you're doing solo.
Ah, okay. With Kanban, it was two guys. It was Vital and who's the other? Ignacy, I think. No, who is it that made it? The guy who does all the solo variants. Him. They were the bots that you're playing against.
No, I think Valella was a reference to Vital, but I don't
Oh,
remember what it is. But that's what it's meant to be.
okay.
Oh, it's Vital Lacerda, so that's what that's supposed to be.
Oh, okay. Well, so yeah, so I like the art a lot on this board. I think it's fun and I think it adds to the gameplay a little bit if you want to get into it. But like you're
Hmm.
saying, you could also ignore it because it's obvious what is part of the game and what is just background.
Yes. All of the iconization for it is very good. All of it is very clear. For the most part, there's not a lot of complexity of icons or complexity on the board because it's really going to be it turns into an efficiency game. And they've dropped down a lot of the currency and things that you do. You've got a head, a torso, and a legs. You've got the blueprints. You've got the finance board. It's there's not enough complexity that you have to have a lot of iconization for it, so it makes it very approachable what everything is doing, with the exception of Sandra. Sandra is going to add complexity, and it's the sort of thing that whoever knows the game is going to have to run Sandra every time. This is something I was
Ah.
getting into later. But that is with regard to that. Another advantage to the board being done the way it is that you probably won't notice. You can flip over. So one of the boards has two layers on it. The assembly board has an actual wheel on it, which is held on. It's just cardboard around cardboard. So I'm hoping it won't get damaged over time. So that one has to go on top because it's kind of dual layered. All the other ones are flat, and you can actually, when you finish the game, you can clear off board one because you don't need the boards at that point in time. At that point in time, you're going to be needing to track points. If you flip over board one on the other side has a victory point track. So at that point in time, when it's time to track the points at the end of the game, you clear it off, flip it over, and voila, you have a victory point board um, right there.
Aha. I was gonna ask you what's on the back of these boards.
At the back of the other boards is blank.
Oh, okay. Oh.
So all in all, the tiles are thick and chunky, all very nice. The meeples are all very nice. So I have nice and positive things to say about each of those, with the exception of the Sandra. And again, that's just the sort of thing I think that it takes experience with the game to be able to understand the workings of it and not gloss over it. Oh, and when I mentioned Sandra, I also mentioned about the speech bonuses that you also get for each of the
Hmm.
tokens, which can also be easily forgotten, but can also be easily attributable to just needing more experience in the game. More on that when we get to gameplay. Shall
Okay.
we move on to theme, Albert?
Did we need to talk anything else about components? You mentioned yeah, I guess you got it all, huh?
I think it's good enough for me.
Okay, then let's move on to theme.
Oh, actually, one thing about components, you're correct. I don't know if it's on all of them. Mine at least came with a nice plastic insert which
Mm.
has spots for everything to be held, spots for each of the players to store their stuff. Very easy to get it out to the table. Kudos for a nice insert.
Okay. Speaking from the deluxe, like the Kanban, the big boxes, those all the newer ones have very nice, perfect inserts. I'm guessing this is similar and kind of standard for these games.
Yeah. So, in terms of theme, the idea of this is that you are building robot companion factories, charging a bunch of money for it, and trying to get it done. Yes, it definitely achieves that. It feels like you're working on a deluxe factory. With the exception that I'm sure deluxe factories don't actually work this way, but there's competition, the people coming in shouting at you like it is not completely efficient, but it's gameized and it's fun. So I enjoy the theme it is being presented in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that the idea of working in a factory and running it felt pretty thematic in Kanban. Likewise, it's surprisingly the theme for these games all seem to be pretty good. All these Vital Lacerda games, the ones I've played.
Yes. So moving on to the rules. The rules. Uh, hmm. Here's.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I really don't understand why it is that they put boards 1, 2, and 3 and 1, 2, and 3 because you first need a project, and then you need parts, and then you assemble the parts, which is boards 3, and then 2, and then 1. The rules have to explain to you board 1 first because it is board 1, and then it explains to you board 2, and then board 3. I,
Mm.
why? It's just. Uh, when
I
I'm
okay, so
explaining the rules, yeah, go on.
that's something I've seen in other Vital Lacerda games. So I remember Kanban having a bit of a confusing jump back and forth rulebook, and I've been playing Vinhos lately. That's coming up at some point soon, I hope. And that excuse me, that rule book has been similar frustrating. It says, okay, now we're going to tell you about the competitions because they're going to matter later on. And so it tells you half the actions, then explains a bunch of rules, and then half the actions again. I don't know. I find it confusing. Maybe there's an easier way to make the game easier to understand. But I don't know. They're tough rules. I've definitely come across better rules.
Yeah. I think
Not
I mean
generalizing here. Not speaking for this game.
the rules do cover each board and do explain each board, but you really need to have sort of an overview for how to do everything before you then start going into the how you do each individual thing. And it's always a difficult balance to be like, well, I can't understand everything until I understand specific things, but you really do need an overview. And when I'm teaching, I do that overview in reverse order from how the rules present it. In addition, the way the rules present it, it presents each of the Sandra actions in each individual board rather than giving me all the Sandra actions separate during Sandra's part of the turn.
Mm.
So, I mean, Sandra has her old turn, but what Sandra does for her turn is spread everywhere else, even though the rest of it is like my part of the rule book, and I'm not involved in what it is that Sandra's doing. So why do I need to have Sandra spread out throughout the rest of the rule book? It's not it's fine. I can get it. It's not the worst. It's just not the best.
Now, when her turn happens at the end, she's only taking one of those actions, all right?
Yeah, she takes action based on the board she's at. We'll get back to that in gameplay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it's not too bad, but yeah, it does feel like you got to jump around a bit. It sounds like it.
Yes.
Okay.
So having said that, let us hop into gameplay so that we can talk about perhaps the meat of this one.
Okay. Well, let's say looking at the rulebook and not having played this game, it looks accessible. The layout looks like it's going to be easy enough to figure out. It feels inviting. It doesn't feel overwhelming when I look at it. Some rulebooks you open them up and you're like, oh, I don't even want to read this book. It looks unpleasant, and
Oh
this
yeah.
doesn't come across that way at all. I think so. At least it's got that going for it. The layout is good.
I will say that the idea of what you're saying, making the game inviting, is true across the board. The game is very inviting, very welcoming, very very friendly and cute.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps from theme all the way through gameplay, it is taking everything that was enjoyable of the one time I played Kanban and bringing it down to a level that I can enjoy playing it. And so that's perhaps a final comment, but I just want to mention that since you mentioned that the rules are inviting.
Yeah. Okay.
So, talking about gameplay. With gameplay, there's going to be those 4 different boards. So there's the board where you get blueprints that you'll need to then fulfill by building bots. There's the place where you get bot parts. There's the place where you build the bot parts. And there's the finance board where you affect end game point opportunities. On your turn, you will move your person from wherever it started to a different spot. So if you were on the finance board, you must move somewhere else. You cannot stay on the finance board. Even though they have 2 or 3 spots for each board, you must go somewhere else. Get the hints from here. So you cannot monopolize
Mhm.
a board.
And so, even though the boards are numbered and building a robot happens in order, you're not necessarily going from the first board through the fourth in order every round. It totally depends.
Yeah, you may not, you may want to. You may have lots of
Right. It
choices of that,
depends.
but you have to move to a different board. So if you were getting bot parts, you must move away from the area where you get bot parts. You can't do the same action 2 times in a row.
And at least in multiplayer, because it's an action selection, if board two is full, there's no way you could go there. You got to pick a different board.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
it's the same thing true here. So when you
Yeah.
are moving people, first we'll go through and we'll see everyone who is lying down. They will move to somewhere new and stand up. Now then, they have to go somewhere new that is not taken. So if there's someone else there, whether they're laying down or standing up, you can't go there. So if everyone has already gone to, say, the finance board, whether last turn or already moved there this turn, you can't go to the finance board. You're just out.
Yeah, this is just like Kanban. I learned Kanban so I could learn how to play this game.
That
Which
could
seems
be.
like a backward way to go.
That could be.
Yeah.
Um so you have to move, and then once everyone has moved to a spot, you will then go 1, 2, 3, 4 and build the robots and grab all the parts and then do the finance board. So you'll go 1 by 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and every time you reach a meeple, they will lay down and do their thing. There is also Sandra. Sandra will move around when she lays. She has an interesting start. At the start of the game, she doesn't move. She doesn't go anywhere else. It's almost as if you really start the turn with her taking just an action to, stand back up again, which I find to be the easiest way. So everyone essentially just lay her down to begin with, and that's an easier way for me to plan it. But that's just the way it is. So everyone will then stand back up. Sandra, for wherever she is. So if she's moving, which she doesn't the first time, if she's moving, she will just move to the right, going to the next board, and go to the next available space. If she has to skip over a board, she'll just skip all the way over to a board. Sandra makes life difficult, and we'll get to why, as well as Sandra doing things. You spend your actions, and there's a lot of opportunity for being able to interact with different things. On the blueprints board, you will be able to take a blueprint from anywhere on the board, but there's a benefit to taking what would be the 2 oldest ones. There's a river element that if you take the 2 oldest ones at the end of the round, stuff will flow down. So the oldest one goes towards the bottom. When you take the oldest ones, you have an option to either take an extra um, part from one of the other stacks, or you have an option to take an extra speech token, or you have an extra option to spend a speech token to place a robot on the assembly board. Placing robots on the assembly board lets you make a robot. As mentioned, if you have a full set of 3 on the assembly board, then you immediately make a robot. So you're going to see a lot of the time that if you do the correct thing, you get to place an extra bot. So even while you're on the blueprints board, you're having an opportunity to make a robot. That can turn into a lot of stuff real fast.
Mhm.
So that lets you sort of combine elements together where you're having one do one thing and do multiple things. And so your turns are theoretically one action, but you can sometimes have those one actions do a whole bunch of things and just sort of move through and sync up all the stuff that you're doing and can reach some surprising turns. This is the first opportunity you have to do that, and can sometimes surprise people out of nowhere. If they think they've locked something down, you can sometimes surprise them. A, a common method of doing that is if someone doesn't notice. So I'm skipping around a little bit and I apologize. But on the assembly board, you place your 3 bot parts down. And when you place a bot part down, it can sometimes give you an extra ability to grab another bot part. Or it can give you an extra ability to grab some whenever you place a bot part down, it can give you the ability to grab some extra speech tokens. So if someone's not noticing, you can only place the third bot part if you have a corresponding blueprint that's on order for you to make. So someone may place two, remaining confident that they're going to be able to place the third one there, say next round or later on or at a different point in time. And you might come and sneak that out from underneath them by grabbing in a different bot area to be able to place the last one, especially if you grab the corresponding blueprint that they were like, nobody can do it because nobody has
Ooh.
a blueprint. You grab the blueprint and then they put the bot part down and steal the last bot that they've been trying to build. Happens all the
Ah.
time. Great fun when it happens.
Yeah. Which is the board? Because I'm getting a little confused. There's so much on there. The board that you placing the bots on is board number 2 or
Board
3?
one.
One.
Board
No, I
one.
was thinking. Okay.
Board one is where you're placing
Got
the
it.
bot
Okay.
parts onto. So there's 3 slots below each bot.
Yeah, I see. Below each color by, yeah. So I could do the blue robots because I got blue parts. And there's 3 slots.
Correct. So the third bot board is where you get a blueprints. And that is just simple. Grab any of the ones that are available on display. The second bot board is the one where you grab bot parts. Now, this one has a wheel. So the bot parts that are at the bottom of the wheel are the ones that are accessible. When you go there, based on essentially turn order, you can either have more or less action points to spend on that wheel. So you have between 4 and 6 action points to spend. It costs an action point to either spin the wheel or take a bot part off the wheel. So you may have to spin the wheel all the way around to get the bot part that you want, and then it'll slide off. Anytime there's an open slot at the top, you also get to fill it. Now that it fills in order, but sometimes there's some selections made about if it goes to the left on the right one or when you want to spill it and things like that. So you have choices about spinning around, so you may want to be the one who fills it up so that you're putting appropriate types of bot parts out to be able to make what it
So
is that you want.
is it filling as the wheel's spinning, sort of thing?
If there's an empty slot at the top, it automatically fills. Doesn't cost any
Oh,
action
okay.
points, it automatically fills. But if you're the one currently running your action, you are the one filling it, so you are getting to pick what it gets filled with from the 4 different available colors.
So if the 2 tiles on the left side of the wheel are empty, you could spend your first action, 2 actions to move it twice and fill both of those slots, and
It
then turn it some more and maybe buy one.
one action rotates 90 degrees, so you always rotate essentially 2 at
Oh,
once. But
okay.
yes,
So you could foreseeably fill the 2 spots from the top and then take those 2 actions in the same turn. Those 2 tiles.
yes.
Is the board actually spin, or are you sliding them manually?
It actually does spin. It is cardboard
Oh,
around
good.
cardboard, so it's not magnet on magnet. It's not plastic on plastic. I haven't seen any of that falling apart on me, so I haven't seen anything like abrading or anything like that
Yeah.
that make me concerned for the longevity of it. But yes, it actually spins. Um, it's sometimes stiff, so you have to be careful doing it. But yes, it actually spins. I would have loved if it were, plastic. I would have loved if it were a ball bearing, or if it was something with a little bit more heft, or even like a magnet or something like that.
Yeah,
But
that's a deluxe game.
yeah,
Okay. I was worried you just slide them because I remember Kanban didn't have anything. I think the time where you're doing stuff like that, you just had to slide the pieces manually or something.
no,
That sounds right. Oh, okay.
it actually rotates.
Cool.
So you rotate around, you grab those bot parts, and you put them on your bot. Next part board is the assembly board. As mentioned, you put them on the appropriate tile, and then when you make 3, you do that. Every time you put a robot down, every time you put a bot part down, if it's not giving you a robot, you get some speech bubble points. So this is the most common way to get speech bubble points. Okay?
Okay. And so you're trying to complete the robot, but if you don't, you're just setting up for somebody else to complete it.
You may be, but it gives
Uh,
you speech points. So
that's true.
yeah,
So maybe you're going for the speech
you
ones.
you do want to sort of be focusing on it, but it gets you speech points, so it's not nothing. And you're
Yeah.
going to a bunch of the times be completing robots for the people in order to be able to get the speech points, because that's just sort of how it all flows together. You don't
Hmm.
really, but yeah, that's
Okay.
just sort of how it flows.
Okay.
Before I head over to the finance board, because I think the finance board is going to be the most complicated, each board has an extra bonus action called an executive action. Each of these three boards has an executive action that, if you want, you can do. So normally you take your one main action, whether it's putting down robot parts, picking up a robot part, or picking up a blueprint. You also may take an executive action. The executive action is different for each of the boards. On the assembly board, you can swap out bot tiles with two bot tiles that are on available on that board. Um, on the part production board, you can discard any three of your part tiles to get one of the ones that are available at the top of the board. And then on the project board, you can discard two project tiles to take a universal part tile. So the universal part tiles can go anywhere. So they give you a lot of flexibility in the other ones. Some of that is very useful, especially if you're feeling tight, because you have a hand limit of 5 projects or 5 part tiles. So you can sometimes be feeling pretty constricted on it, especially at the end of the game, which is an interesting catch mechanism. I mention this because at the end of the game ends when someone has 5 robots built, and you can only have a hand of 5, which means that towards the end of the game, you're going to have no hand and no flexibility to be
Oh.
able to decide anything at all.
So when you build a robot, you're saying the robot goes into your hand, or
The
it's the
robot,
blueprint that?
so when I say hand, it's actually just a display over by
Okay.
you.
Okay.
So it's not actually in your hand. The robot meeple goes on your blueprint as a completed blueprint. So it stays as a blueprint with a meeple on it, and you can only ever have 5 blueprints in your area at once.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
So these executive actions gives you some flexibility with the fact that those blueprints and those bot parts may not be the ones that you want. You still have the ability to discard some of them for these universal actions to be able to do a couple other things.
Mhm.
Last board is the finance board. The finance board is messing with endgame points. There's 2 types of endgame points that you get at the end of the game. First, each of the robots that you build is going to be worth a certain number of points, and that is based on the top half of the robot board. Unfortunately, that board changes. So each of the robots starts being worth 6 points at the beginning of the game, but every time you build a robot, that gets less. So it goes down to 5 and then 4, and then it just sort of flatlines or flattens out, plateaus. Um, when you spend points on the speech board, you can push that up to be 6, 8, 10, 12, and all the way up to 15, so that each of those robots you have is worth 15 points. So if you built, 4 red robots, which would end the game itself, but if you push that all the way to the top, each of those red robots can be worth a lot of points, and that's very useful. As I mentioned before, if you don't have ones that you have, then essentially you're giving free points to someone else, but there is some incentive to do that. There's a little white line that if you cross over it, you get a free bonus action, whether it's to take a project or to place an extra bot part somewhere else or
Mm.
over on the assembly line. So sometimes you'll push up a robot price, essentially points for it, in order to be able to take the free bonus action, because sometimes you'll have the extra speech tokens to be able to want to run your moves and have everything sync up that way. So sometimes that's just simply how that works. So that's one of the ways you get action points, is by getting action points for each robot that you complete. The second way that you can potentially get points is by completing contracts. Each game, there was a randomly determined set of 5 robots, a random set of 9 contracts that are going to be distributed on the board. Those will each have either a specific pair of robots that you have to make or a single robot that you have to make. The first person to bid on a contract tile gets more points than the second, and the third person cannot do it, so it's limited to 2. If you fulfill that objective, so you make the robots printed on that board, you get points based on its location on the contract board, as well as points listed on the actual tile itself. So those will be the common ways that you get points, either by completing those contracts or by noting how much points each robot that you build is worth. If you fail to get a contract tile, that is going to be worth negative points for you, and you want to avoid that. You can also get some extra points from having speech tokens and from having extra, by having some extra, well, really, I guess just for having speech tokens, because you can lose points for having stuff you didn't use completely efficiently. So if you have extra part tiles or extra projectiles that you didn't finish, you lose points for those. So you want to be very efficient and not take stuff that you won't use at the end of the game. So that summarizes, or actually goes through in detail for each of the things that you can do. Sandra is moving around doing different things. Each time it gets to her, I'm not going to go all the way into what Sandra does, but each of the times she gets into her, she's going to do something to mess with the board. She's going to either move part tiles around or bump up the prices on the finance board or put out more part tiles. She's just going to mess with the board and do other stuff. In addition, Sandra is shouty. Nobody likes being around her. Nobody likes working with her. So if you're ever taking a spot on, or if you're ever using a spot on a board where she is on, you have to pay an extra speech token to be able to use that. Otherwise, if you don't spend the speech token, you are just stuck listening to her and not getting anything done because she's busy being shouty at you.
Does she move first, or do the players move first?
She moves in the same time that players do, so you go down the board.
Okay.
When you reach her, she moves.
So you may know where she's going to be depending on whether she went first or last.
And you
You
may
may,
not. Some
and
other
you may
people
not.
can
Yeah.
mess with that by closing off a board. So, for example, if you are on a
Mhm.
spot without anyone else and you expect someone to fill that spot, or you expect someone to not empty that spot, and then you open it up, well, all of a sudden, hi, Sandra, you are coming to join my board, and shoot.
Oh, and yeah,
So,
love sitting with the manager. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. So, that can sometimes surprise you and sometimes really get bothersome and cost you those extra resources that you just simply do not want to have. So the game is really all about efficiency to be able to do that. The game ends when all bots from one color have been done, or one player has gotten their full 5. You finish the round. Everyone does their action for the round, and then score points as we discussed before.
Okay.
When you are doing
It's a
so,
lot.
yeah, go on.
It's a lot, but I don't think it's as much as Kanban. And it looks, from what I recall, now it's been about a year since I got rid of it, I guess. Kanban had a lot more currencies and things to keep track of than this game. So it was more complicated in that you're doing more thinking and more math and translating from this to that to that. Here it seems like really the main thing is the speech balloons, which those word bubbles, which there were a lot less of that in Kanban. You didn't
Yeah.
get very many. Here it seems like you get a lot potentially,
Yes, you get a lot.
and you're getting and spending them constantly.
Yes,
Okay.
you're getting them and spending them. You want to be getting them because they let you perform more actions, let you do more stuff on the finance board, let you do more bonus actions. So you constantly want to be getting them, and you will end up spending them.
Yeah, it seems like this is maybe less complicated, but very similar, very familiar for sure.
Yes. So
I like it. Okay.
when you are
Mhm, go on.
playing solo, there's an extra person, so you play with the 2-player rules, which means that Sandra, instead of just being shouty, you can't move to the spot that Sandra's at when you're playing 2 players. Same thing applies when you're playing solo. So the solo second player, Valela, is essentially just an automa type thing. He has 2 sets of they're essentially decks, but they're decks out of cardboard tiles. Um, you'll have 2 sets of these decks. The first thing that happens is you'll determine based on a random deck just where it is that he goes. And he'll go there and perform an action based on what it is that is presented on his task tile, and he'll do that thing. Sometimes he'll be performing tasks or assembling robots or just running around and doing whatever his thing is. He'll have his own little board that will be used to keep track of what it is that he's doing. He has a bot deck that is used to figure out which sort of bot it is that he's focusing on. But you're essentially just shuffling up his bots, shuffling up his tasks, shuffling up his board, determine where he goes, what it is that he wants, what it is that he's doing, as well as he'll have a deck which will tell you which contracts it is that he wants to focus on and grab, and you'll then go look at the contracts to be able to determine what it is that he wants. It is very automa. He doesn't do quite the same similar thing as another player, um, which means that there's a lot less prediction. You can't play the game when you're playing Philella where you're
Mm,
like, I think that you're not going to go to here and do this one because you have these ones and I see what's available here. Because sometimes you're like, nope, I'm going to come and do the yellow one anyway. So sometimes he'll
hmm
come up with a couple surprises that don't apply the same as multiplayer. But on the other hand, he has a predictable deck. There's only four
Yep.
of each of them, so you can keep track of what it is that he's doing for each of those and have distinct guesses. So there's still a set of guesswork that works with him, just a different set of guesses it is that you're having to figure out what it is that they do when they're doing.
Yep. And just to clarify, it's not a deck of cards; it's a deck of 4 tiles.
Yes.
Right. So it's much easier to manage. I've Kanban had cards, and they're a little bit of a pain to shuffle. It's not a huge number of cards, and small numbers always hard to shuffle with 4 tiles. I mean, you could just roll a d4 and remove the one that got rolled, or something like that, which makes
I
it
never thought
easier
to do
to and
that.
quicker.
D4s are
I've done
gross.
that with some kids. Well, okay, d6, ignore the highest 2 numbers, or roll it twice. There's ways to do it with a die that make it easier, and you don't have to shuffle them at all. You just slide, roll the number, the one that gets picked, slide it out of the way, and now next time there's only 3 to choose from.
Sure. I actually feel like I would
Yeah.
have preferred cards because I just sleeve small decks of cards and I don't have nearly as
Oh,
much issue
that's
with them.
true.
But
Yeah, but shuffling 3 cards or 4 cards is, I mean, you don't feel like at least for me, I never feel like I'm really shuffling. I may, if I shuffle, I feel like I've done a poor job no matter because it's so few. I may as well use a die anyway just to make sure it really is random. Is how I always feel about it.
I feel like now I need to go throw in a D4 in that because I just
Okay.
never thought about that.
Use
But
it.
that's a really good point.
Use a D12 actually. That might be better because a D12 will work for 4 or 3 easily. If you do a little bit of simple math.
That's a good point.
And what else are you gonna do with a D12? So few games use them.
So you don't have to. So he's not keeping track of points. This Automa, this Villela Automa. He's essentially just messing with stuff and removing stuff and advancing the end game and sometimes just interfering in your plans. So this is just a beat your own high score type game, which is my personal preference. I like those type of things. But it does give you an extra task that you have to make sure that you're doing. So it does change it up in that there is something specific that you have to do. Um, I've kind of wished that the tasks were assignments from Sandra instead of tasks from Villela, because they're
Mm-hmm.
tasks that we have to do and not tasks that Villela has to do. That's just perhaps a thematic quirk. But when you're playing solo, otherwise it's all just generally the same type of thing. Just it feels very similar to the multiplayer with perhaps the not player interactions you have with most of these type of things.
Okay. And you said to beat your own score, but there is a score track at the end to see how you did, right? Zero, so if you did poorly. 0 to 19 is poor, 20 to 49 is adequate, and 50 to infinity is exemplary.
Yes,
So I guess the first time you're at least shooting for that, and then beyond you're shooting to beat your last score.
yes.
Yeah, I like it. This looks really cool, Julius. This looks like a really neat game. It reminds you a lot of Kanban. I've said that multiple times. Kind of wish I could play that now. That's so big. Also, I'm glad I'm not gonna play it
You just got
again.
to go play Bot Factory. That's really what
I
it
I
is.
think so. That's what I'm thinking. It's like, man, I should play this. This seems fun because.
This, I mean, I've commented throughout the whole thing. I'm going to just say I give this one a lot of credit. I very much enjoyed this game. I give it a big recommendation. It is an accessible and approachable version of Kanban. It
Mhm.
doesn't have as much complexity. It doesn't have as much resources and stuff going on as you have in Kanban, where, like you mentioned, it's got a bunch of mini games that all tie together. These aren't mini games; it's 4 actions that all tie together. It
Yeah.
is very approachable and very fun, while still having the complexity of I do a thing and it does a thing and I do a thing and I plan a thing. If you can slot out your turn to be able to, for example, go to the parts board, which you grab the part that gives you the blueprint, grab the blueprint that gives you the speech token, grab another part using a speech token that lets you put down a board that does this, that does that, does that, and all of those things flow together. It feels really good when you can have those sort of explosive turns to be able to have everything process at once. And it frankly does feel good when you're a multiplayer and you snipe something from someone else, or you have a plan and you predict where someone else goes, or you mess with someone where you see that they're low on speech points. And if you move Sandra into their space, then they're not going to have the speech points to do what they want to do. Like, there's a lot of opportunities for fun, intelligent plays, a lot of opportunity for stuff to work out quite well. That all of that is very fun. Um, One of the things that is kind of frustrating is that it perhaps it's analogous to a catch-up mechanic. Every time you build a bot, the bot is worth less points. So you're sort of self-defeating yourself. The very last thing you do is to, cut off yourself on points, because you build a bot and then lose points for all of them. So I mentioned you can build all 4 robots. Well, you do that, and then you lose 2 points for each bot because you built the robot. So, like, diversify a little bit is the solution, I guess. Maybe I'm not, or build
Yeah.
4 robots and then make your last one a different color. I'm not
But
sure.
Sandra also raises the cost of the robots, right? If she goes
Sandra
there.
Sandra does only for the lowest one. Sandra does the
Oh, only for the robots.
lowest one.
Okay. Which is
So
good because you built a bunch of red ones. And now it's really cheap. She's going to help you out a bit. And then, yeah.
yeah,
So, I mean, it's strategy, right? You can figure out how to do it. And it
yeah.
depends on. I think I would enjoy this game more multiplayer than solo.
Um,
Hate to admit it on this podcast, but yeah.
yeah. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Try it. Frankly, try it solo. Valella running around getting in your way. I think that's also fun. It gives you 2. I'm going to call them robots, but that's confusing. But 2 bots. It gives you Sandra and Valella that move in a very deterministic fashion, and you
Yeah.
can mess with where it is that they're going, what it is that they're doing. You can predict them, and you can. It amps up the level of intelligent play by having essentially another, I'm going to call them a resource, but they're a thing on the board that move around a predictable fashion, that if you make it predicted in the right way, you can make cool stuff happen for you or for
Hmm.
messing with Valella. So
Yep.
yeah, I
and
think
and they're not. It's not that complicated to do them either, so that's fast and goes well. Kanban had this weird scoring thing. I think the AI did get points or something like that, or no, it didn't get points. You only track your own score, but when the bot did stuff, it would take points away from you. And I
yeah,
think
I
your
hate
goal was
that.
to end up with positive numbers. Oh, that was hard. That was rough because my score kept going lower and lower and lower and lower. It never went up.
Yeah,
I was so bad at that one.
I've got another game that's not coming right now that has a similar type thing where it's taking away points from you. It's annoying. This one doesn't have
Okay.
that. This one is just a thing that rewards intelligent play by being able to predict where it is and move him around and move Sandra around and sort of keep in mind where things are going. You don't have to do it every time, but when you manage to see an opportunity and strike at it, you feel really good about it because it works perfectly.
That that is it's a neat sounding game, Julius. It does sound fun. I remember you talking about this when it was on Kickstarter, and I was like, I don't know, I've already got Kanban. Who needs this? And I'm kind of thinking
Yeah.
maybe I was backwards about that.
Yeah, I think to me it feels like a more, because even for, you mentioned that little one Lisboa, and I played
Yeah.
Lisboa once, and I also just felt overwhelmed by it. I felt like there's a lot of stuff going on. I remember learning the rules. I'm like, I've got this now, and I've played one game with it, but unless we're going to play it like you know within a week or two, the next time we do it, I'm essentially going to be playing a brand new game of it. And there was
Yeah.
so many things going on
Yeah.
that I would have to just redo all over again. It doesn't build into repeated plays. This one has enough in it that even I can play it a while later. I'm like, all right, I remember this. I remember some of those things. I remember what's going on, and it brings it to a level of accessibility that I really enjoy being able to play it and get and run with what it is that we're doing with it.
hmm And and all that being said, when all the talking about Kanban is this is nicer, and I think I like this, but I did not at all dislike Kanban. I thought it was a great game and I had a great time. But there's so much of it. I finally said I'm not going to really get to play this game much. It's too big, and every time I want to play it, like you're saying, it'd be a learning process again. It's and I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old, and I just don't have enough room for that many game rules in my head or something. I'm starting to get this mixed up with like Sorry and Life, and all right. I think Sandra's in the observatory lead pipe. Oh wait, wrong. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah,
They're all good games, but this one does feel way more accessible, and that is also something to laud.
exactly. So I think that it does not feel it doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels just at that sweet spot where there's enough going on to allow you to keep intelligent plays without being able to overwhelm you with all the stuff that's going on. So highly recommend it. I think it is very good.
Excellent. All right then. I think we've assembled this podcast. Now I just need to pack it up and then ship it.
Oh, Albert,
Is that yeah?
you make me so sad I could cyborg.
Oh, cyborg. Ah, Julius. Okay, everyone. Thank you. Have a good time. Happy New Year, everyone. Even though actually there's been a New Year episode, but it got recorded like a week ago. So today's January 3rd. For those of you that are curious.
Have a great day, Albert. Hope you don't see too much snowbots.
Nope. We might get some. Oh yeah, we might get some. That's really exciting.
Thanks for listening. We love feedback, so we love hearing from you. You can reach me at julius@oneplayerpodcast.com or JLBird on BGG, and Albert can be reached at albert@oneplayerpodcast.com or Fractalune on BGG. Our website is oneplayerpodcast.com with the number 1, and we're also on Twitter at oneplayerpodcast. The intro music is copyright Angus and can be found at jamendo.com. The transition music is copyright by Dan Elduce Pancaldi, whose page is at donpancaldi.com. The One Player Podcast is protected under a Creative Commons share-alike license. Thanks for listening.